Hi, everyone. Today we're joined by a guest who has a wealth of experience and extensive knowledge of how law firms operate and how technology drives innovation. He's led various IT teams to achieve great success over the years and has held directorship and C-level positions at some of the world's most renowned law firms, which include Kennedy's, Ashurst, Clyde & Co, and HFW. So without further ado, I'd like to give a warm welcome to Chris White, Strategic Technology Advisor and CIO. Thank you, Chris, for joining and welcome.
Thank you very much, Alex. Delighted to be here and really looking forward to a great discussion today.
Great stuff. Thank you, Chris. And also joining us today, we have one of Sicilian's finest, a man who leads from the front and has a deep intellectual understanding of business technology needs. That man is no other than Alex Hooper, Sicilian's very own Director of Services and Business Transformation. Thank you for joining us, Alex.
Always a pleasure. And with an intro like that, what can go wrong?
Setting the scene for a great session here. So to kick things off, Chris, you've been involved with some really interesting things during this lockdown period, from advisory on coping strategies for various different law firms of various sizes, and then also some work involved with the Lord Chief Justice. Perhaps you could take us through some of what you've been doing, what you've been seeing, and what's been going on in your world.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, delighted to. Well, we've all been living through, it's an overused phrase, but very interesting times. Come the start of the year, I was involved in quite a number of very interesting projects around sort of technology, strategy, data, with a few law firms and other professional services businesses. That all came to a bit of a grinding halt as we got used to the new environment, the new way of working. Lots of projects were put on hold whilst firms entered really what was probably described as survival mode. I've been doing lots of interesting stuff, as you say, Alex, ranging from I did some work with the Lord Chief Justice to help work out how we could get the courts working remotely. Clearly during these times we needed to keep the whole judiciary working and the court of law in action, but clearly we couldn't have the normal traditional sort of face-to-face courtroom hearings. So I did some very interesting work with the Lord Chief Justice, really how to get what a very, very traditional thinking group of people, i.e. judges, working and running hearings using technology like Teams and Zoom. That in itself brought around a lot of issues, not just the technological issues. I say a lot of these people they're used to working in an environment where they've got complete support around them. They've got their clerks working with them, their secretaries, spoon-feeding them all the information they need to actually run the courts. If they were sitting at home on their own technology, many of which weren't particularly used to using that type of technology, it presented all sorts of problems. And also from a process point of view, how do they get access to the right information? How do you ensure that the person that you're trying gets a fair hearing? A lot of process work around that. So that was a very interesting journey at the start of the whole pandemic, the whole lockdown. And we successfully got courts, certainly some courts, up and running, and people using this type of technology. And again, maybe something we'll explore a little bit further in a moment is, we hear a lot about the new norm and whether this will become the new norm, whether we will not need to hold so many sort of physical trials and in courtrooms going forward, or whether people will decide this is a better way of doing things. So that was interesting. And then doing work with a number of other businesses, including quite a number of law firms, initially helping them out with the phase of almost survival. How on earth are we going to deal with people not being able to come into the office? How are we going to continue to service our clients? How are our people going to work? How are they going to get remote access to all the systems, the documents, the information, the data they need? How are they going to communicate with their clients? What are all the security implications around that? So I did work with a number of firms helping them out with that. And again, I must say that most firms, I think, have survived very, very well in the environment and continue to run their businesses, albeit a number of challenges. And then that sort of morphed more into, right, okay, we're surviving now, we're doing okay. How do we sort of come out of all of this when sort of lockdown finishes? How are we going to recover our business and start getting people back into the office, maybe start accepting that there have been some real cultural changes going on during this period. So getting firms to start thinking about that. And then the final piece really is what impact is it going to have on longer term technology? I'm talking to a lot of firms about them. They think they've just about got away with this by the skin of the teeth almost. And whilst the CIOs, the IT directors, the heads of IT have been banging on about the need to invest in technology going forward, process improvement, automating process, all those sorts of things, the good old lawyers have not necessarily been listening to that. I think now we're pushing on an open door with a lot of this stuff. So again, that's really the final phase.
Chris, do you think we're seeing it in a lot of the organisations that we're dealing with that obviously technology, the situation has forced companies to embrace a new digitized format probably a lot quicker than they were wanting to, but we're also seeing companies now potentially look at the structure of the organisation. And do you think that will change in law firms as well?
I think it will change. Yeah, I think this period we've been going through has really accelerated a lot of these changes. There's no doubt that the firms that have invested in the past in more up-to-date technology, cloud technology, those sorts of things, they've had a much easier ride than the firms that are trying to run everything on premise, access via Citrix, and all those sorts of things. And I think firms have for a long time been sort of looking at their operating models. They've been looking at perhaps automating parts of their processes. They've been looking at better management information systems in place. Trying to reduce the amount of paper they're using, the number of secretaries they've got, and all those sorts of things. But quite frankly, if you're a big city firm with partners earning sort of £1 million plus a year, that the focus is on making money, not really sort of too much focus on sort of the margins or trying to reduce the costs in your business. If you're an engineering firm, you probably have a very, very different dynamic where every penny matters, whereas law firms, are fairly high margin businesses. So they've not really had that razor-like focus on the efficiency of their business. Again, I think what we've experienced with this pandemic and working through it is firms have really now understood the need to do it, the imperative of doing it, but also they feel now they've got the excuse to do it. I was talking to a managing partner of a firm fairly recently, and he was saying, I've been wanting to reduce the number of secretaries I've got in my business for a very long time. We've got far too many. We know we have, but quite frankly, it's been too difficult. I would upset too many people by doing it. Now he's saying, I'm absolutely going to be doing this. So I think what it's done is actually driven a lot of that transformation in businesses. It's things like firms. We all know firms have been talking about agile working for a long time. How many firms before the pandemic were actually really doing that? I've heard so many partners saying, "Oh no, I need my lawyer sitting next to me so I can see what they're doing." Now we are forced in a position, and people are saying, "Well, actually, this ain't too bad. We can get away with this. We can work very efficiently actually doing this." Do I really want my lawyers commuting 3 hours a day to come and sit in an office in the City of London or wherever else it might be, which is costing me, by the way, an absolute fortune to rent that accommodation? So I think we're going to see firms really accelerate things which I believe would have happened anyway because of the competitive nature of the market and globalization of the market. But I think we're going to see firms really focusing very quickly on this sort of stuff, and we're going to see a lot of this sort of transformation coming along quite quickly.
Yeah. And I think we're also seeing that it's potentially going to change the way firms recruit and look at their talent pool. I think what it's shown is that, and there is a global talent pool to pull on now, and you don't need to be sitting in an office in London to contribute.
I I think that's absolutely right. And again, having worked for some pretty large global law firms, where we've had offices all around the world, there's always been a huge amount of reluctance to pass work to another office, which could be, they might be better qualified to do it. They certainly could be a lower cost jurisdiction. But it's very much this attitude of it's my work and I'm going to fulfill it from London or wherever. But I think on the other point, I think we're going to see a lot of lawyers, who, as I say, have traditionally sort of commuted into town, into London, saying, I don't want to do that anymore, thank you very much. I got used to working in my nice environment, and I can work perfectly effectively from here. We've seen some firms, Keystone's a good example of that, where lawyers have wanted to get out of the rat race and the city way of working, and adopted a very different environment which suits their needs. The work-life balance is better. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that. And I think it's not just firms saying, right, we don't want to come into the office. I think it's a lot of lawyers going to say, right, we don't want to come into the office 5 days a week. May come in 1 day a week or whatever, but not 5 days a week. But again, that presents a whole different range of issues around sort of culture and how you bring teams together, how you train people, the whole cultural bit, the mental health bit, and those sorts of things. So I think we're entering a world where we're going to see a very different dynamic and lots of different challenges presented to us. How do you know your people are going to be effective? I imagine sort of getting better management controls in place so you know what your people are up to, what they're doing. As well as sort of the more pastoral, cultural side of things. How do you keep happy? How do you know your people are safe, working in a safe environment? How do you know, their mental health is okay, and those sorts of things. So new challenges.
That is a very, very important topic that you've just brought up there, Chris, in that, measuring that productivity and maintaining those relationships with your colleagues. It can be quite challenging when you're all working from home. Just as an example, you need something done. Now you've got to jump on a tool to kind of communicate with somebody who needs to get that certain task completed. You can't just go up to them in the office. So what would your message be to managing partners to kind of put them at ease, to say, you know what, this new way of working actually does work? The tools and the processes that you put in place will enable us to succeed. Yeah,
well, I think there are probably two things around that. I've always argued that it's very easy to actually monitor the performance of a lawyer. You charge a lawyer with billing 1,500, 1,800 hours a year or whatever, and they either do it or they don't do it. Clearly the quality's got to be there, but does it actually matter when they do it, where they do it from? As long as their clients are happy and they're getting, clients are getting the level of service they want, and the lawyer is actually billing the number of hours the firm wants them to bill. So I think that's sort of one point. It's very easy to measure that. It's probably less easy to measure performance of some of the support staff in the organisation. Sort of how do you know where, I don't know, seeing marketing people, just I'm not singling out marketing people at all, but how do you know how productive they are, because you don't have the same degree of measures as you do with a lawyer who's got to bill so many hours per day. So that's one thing. I think the other thing which is going to do in this new world, I think we're going to see an acceleration of automation of processes. One of the challenges I think some firms, or I've heard some firms have actually come across, is sort of more in the back end processes, like the billing, the financial controls, and all of that sort of thing. And I think, and also sort of not having your support staff around you, your secretary around you, the same degree of printing ability, all of those sorts of things. And I think we're going to see a lot more focus on that. I was talking to one managing partner again recently, and they've reduced their postage costs and their printing costs by 50% during the pandemic, partly because the lawyers sitting at home don't have access to the same degree of printing or quality printer, partly because if they email a document, naturally they would have sent a hard copy in the post. They're questioning why they need to do that now. And so people are going to adapt these new ways of working. Things like we've talked an awful lot in the past about automating due diligence using products like Kira, Raven, Luminance, all of those sorts of things. We've talked a lot about document assembly type tools, access to those sorts of technologies, all of which, in theory, can add a huge amount of benefit to an organization. There's always, there's been some new resistance from law firms to do that for all sorts of reasons, from, we can't build so much time doing that, or, we're professionals, we don't want to rely on a machine to create a document for us, and those things. Again, if you don't have that support environment around you, that very expensive support environment around you, I think we're going to see people start relying on this technology a lot more easily than they might have done in the past. So again, I think it's really going to accelerate that new digital transformation type world, which, as I say, we've been talking about for a long time, and we've been doing a lot of it for a long time as well. But I think it's going to accelerate it.
Yeah, and I certainly think clients expect that to happen now. I think the concept of, as you say, reams of paper and face-to-face conversations, the last 3 months has proven that you don't need to do that anymore. Whilst we all enjoy it, and I think hopefully we're going to go back to a few more face-to-faces, because it's always good to build that relationship. But in terms of the background activity and what automation can do, it presents a great opportunity for all firms, and not just in legal.
I think that's absolutely right, and I was going to make that exact point. Clients do expect it. We shouldn't forget that clients are going through exactly the same challenges as law firms are, and they're all trying to work out what the best way of working is going forward, how they need to adapt their business, their business processes and their operating models, all those sorts of things. So yeah, I think that's right. I think the other point is that these days technology is available to everybody. I, as well as working with some of the largest firms in the world, I also do quite a lot of work with more regional and sort of local firms with sort of 250, 300 people, things like that. The difference between technology now and probably 5 years ago, certainly 10 years ago, when I first joined the legal technology space, it was only the very largest firms that could afford the best technology. If you wanted to put a document management system in place, it's going to cost you £1 million, and that's fine if you're a Ashurst or Clifford Chance or Clyde & Co, or whoever else it might be. That ain't so fine if you're sort of a smaller regional firm, where sort of £1 million is your, if you're very lucky, your annual IT budget, if not your decade's IT budget. The difference now is that particularly with cloud, everybody has access to the same technology broadly. So, rather than putting a document management system in costing me £1 million like an iManage, I can buy myself half a dozen NetDocs licenses at a cost I can afford. So people have access to it. So that's beginning to be a little bit of a level as well. And quite a lot of the work I've been doing is actually helping the smaller firm managing partners think through this and think about technology as a strategic asset as opposed to just a cost.
Absolutely, and almost a differentiator, and I'd imagine it will, the cost of entry into the market is potentially lower, and you can still compete.
Absolutely right. We said many times, I think, that if we were to set up a new law firm now, there's absolutely no way it would look anything like an existing firm. We probably wouldn't have big, huge, expensive London offices. We probably wouldn't have server rooms and data centers on-prem, all that sort of stuff. We'd, if we had a London presence at all, it'd probably be a WeWork somewhere and access all of our systems through the cloud.
Excellent. And what in terms of moving the working remotely, do you see any risk and compliance issues that law firms will have to address?
I think there are. I think there are security risks as well, and I think security is going to come to the fore. Firms have invested a lot of money in security, but I think but that's been what you might term very corporate security, protecting their glass building in the City of London or wherever else it might be. I think suddenly the dynamic has changed. So if you've got 1,000 people in your business, rather than everybody sitting under one roof, they're now sitting in 1,000 places, and you've got no control over what technology they're using, in terms of they might be sitting on a 10-year-old PC where antivirus stuff is out of date, and all of those sorts of things. We know it's difficult enough to actually get law firm staff to adhere to security policy. We can do our bit from the back end from an IT perspective, but it's difficult enough to get lawyers to adhere to our policies. So I think a lot of firms at the moment have been going through the process of just reminding people about it, but I think lots of firms out there, certainly firms I've been talking to, are seriously going to be reviewing what they've got in terms of security, and whether it's current, it's fit for purpose for whatever the new norm is going to look like, which will almost certainly involve a lot more agile, remote, home working. So I think they're going to be doing that. I think from a compliance point of view, again, how people are accessing data. I think the pandemic we've been through, people have just done things to keep them going. Normally a move from everybody in the office one day, everybody at home the next day, you probably have 5 years planning to actually get to that position. This just happened overnight, just like that. And there's no doubt there were some shortcuts taken. We didn't necessarily give it the same degree of rigor as we might have done in normal times. That's fine. We've just accepted that. But again, it's just about understanding risk of your business. It's making sure you've got a proper risk register. It's making sure that you're aware of where the risks are, and that you're actually mitigating those risks where you can. So yeah, I think there is going to be a big review around security and also compliance as well.
And Chris, what would what do we say to managing partners who are still scared of cloud and who still have their reservations in place?
What, polite words or what? I guess so. No, what I would say to them, my view on cloud, and I was involved in the cloud world very early on. I worked back in 2009. I spent a period of time working for Mimecast, who, as we know, are widely used within the legal community, and that's a cloud offering. And I used to, when the managing partners or the partners used to say, "Oh no, it's far too insecure. Our clients won't let us do this, etc." I used to say to them, "Well, what's the application which most of your lawyers live in most of the time?" The answer being email. Okay, fine. Do you know for the last 2 years a lot of your emails been hosted in the cloud? Oh, really? Has it? Yeah. Do you know when you go internet banking? You're pretty well going into a cloud environment. So I think these barriers are reducing. And quite frankly, I'm pretty disgusted that managing partners are still concerned about the cloud. I think we've got new reasons to go to the cloud now. Who are the firms who've been able to adapt the new way of working most easily? Well, it's those who are in the cloud. Who are the firms who struggled? Well, it's those with older technology still on premise. So I think we've got another dynamic there. And I'm not saying we should just dash out to the cloud tomorrow, just push everything from our home environment into the cloud tomorrow. We have to do our due diligence. We have to make sure that we understand the security risk. We have to make sure we understand who we're getting in bed with. The organization is secure, our data is secure, data sovereignty, and all those sorts of issues. But any cloud provider worth their salt these days has got compelling responses to any of those questions. So I think, again, it's just putting the business case to the managing partner. The excuse that, our clients don't want us to do this, I think broadly has gone away now. When I've been confronted with that in the past, I say, okay, fine, let me have a word with the client then. So I call up the security team, or I call up the chief executive of the client and explain to them what we're doing, explain to them the rigor we're putting in place. And, by and large, they say, yeah, that's absolutely fine. And again, I think, what a lot of managing partners got to realize, if they get in bed with the right cloud provider, it's probably a damn sight more secure than doing it yourself.
Absolutely, and I think we see that across all of our customers in terms of the argument that cloud is no longer is not secure. It's just is nonsense.
It is.
So we've got a question from one of our audience, Chris, and they've asked how can law firms monetize their technical intellectual property? Do you think they're going to be able to differentiate themselves with with how they interact with technology and their clients?
Yeah, well, I think there are a number of facets to that. The first one is, we sort of covered briefly, and that is, the automation of processes, the de-skilling of work. Let's use due diligence. That's the widely used example. So rather than having a team of half a dozen lawyers, albeit fairly junior lawyers, sort of sitting in a data room for a week, going through all of the documentation and finding the salient parts of the contracts and those sorts of things, using machines to do that can take a huge amount of cost out of the business, which can then be passed on to some of it can be passed on to the client. There are challenges around how you actually monetize that, how much you charge the client, but again, firms are working through that. So that's sort of one example. Using document assembly tools, automating, compiling a share purchase agreement, using a machine which might take half an hour rather than sort of a day's work a lawyer might have done traditionally doing that. Again, those benefits can be passed on to the client as well as the firm. So I think there's that area of technology. The other big area, which I think is still to some degree in its infancy, and I've been doing work with a couple of firms and also a big economic research business on this, is around data. Data. We all, law firms are data-driven businesses. We might call it know-how, we might call it documents, we might call it email stores or whatever, but basically data. Law firms are sitting on significant amount of data. Most of them don't really know how to access it. They certainly don't know how to monetize it, probably over and above sort of the know-how systems which many firms have. But that's more about sort of, have we done any work like this before? Is there a boilerplate or a template we can use to give us a bit of a head start? It's not actually, if you like, monetizing or adding value to the data. Work I've done in this area, when I was at Clyde & Co, we were doing a lot of work with UCL, University College London, around trying to understand what data we've got and how we can get value from it, ranging from trying to predict the outcome of litigation. How do you do that? Well, if you're a lawyer and you go to a client, they want you to do some litigation for them, they're going to ask you what's the chance of succeeding. As a partner, I might say, well, I've worked on 10 cases like this, so I think this is broadly going to be the chance of succeeding. As a firm, we might have worked on 2,000 cases of that type. So if you can access that data, analyze it, and you can see what input's been given to the litigation, what the outputs are, which court's been sitting in judgment of this, even down to which judge has been sitting in judgment of the case, you've got a far better degree of certainty about what the outcome might be. Why is that important? Well, it didn't used to be, because we just charged the client by the hour. Now, more and more, we're getting into success fees, share costs, and all those sorts of things. So I'll tell you what, we give you 50% of the fee up front, and then if you win, we give you the other 50%. If you don't win, we won't give you that money. So it's as important for the law firm to know what the outcome's likely to be. We were also using data for looking for fraudulent insurance claims and those sorts of things. So there's an awful lot of data. And a lot of firms don't really know, A, what they've got, B, how to access it, and C, how to monetize it. So I think that's another area where technology is really going to help to add value to the clients, and if we can find ways of monetizing that, add a revenue to the firms. So two things: firstly, taking cost out of your existing businesses by automating processes, de-skilling work. Secondly, let's look at the data we've got and the value we've got locked up in our businesses, and how we can lock that and add value to our clients in some way. And then again, I think the third area, which really comes under cost, is people are going to be working in a far more agile way. Do we really need to spend £10 million a year on rent for a shiny glass office in the city? Absolutely no, we don't.
Yeah.
And I think so. There's going to be, and then you've got all support services around that as well, where you can take cost out.
Yeah, and Chris, we talk about how technology can obviously make us more efficient, and what another question from one of our participants is about the electronic signing of documents, and there's some question and consultation going on regarding the viability of this for certain elements. Do you have any thoughts on that, and in terms of will it continue to be a viable process?
Well, I think it will, and again, why is there resistance to a lot of this technology? We've seen it, a lot in the past. Be it e-billing, be it e-signing, and I think a lot of the regulators are holding us back in so many ways. I remember not that long ago when the regulators were saying that if you email somebody, that's fine, you can do that, but you have to keep a hard copy of the email as evidence, as a record of that email, because they didn't trust that the email record would be sufficient or there in the past. That common practice soon changed the regulator's mind on that, and I think that's going to be the same with, as I say, things like e-signing, e-billing, all those sorts of things. It's going to become the new norm. It really is. I do work with, say, some smaller firms who do a lot of conveyancing work, and in fact, I've had discussions recently with the regulators on this very subject. We all know blockchain is coming along. We all know that Land Registry are putting residential records of residential property onto blockchain. I can envisage a time not too far away where the work of local solicitors around conveyancing is just going to be wiped away, because the record is going to be on blockchain, so nobody can dispute that the ownership of the property. That record is going to be logged into the local planning and all the other land registry checks and those sorts of things need to be done. Those records are going to be linked into the financial systems. And Alex, if I want to buy your house, we'll agree a price on it. We'll go to our smartphones. We'll tap in all the information. All the searches will go away. It'll come back and say, yeah, clean, no problem at all. You'll hand the keys over to me. Transaction done. Okay. I'm exaggerating to make your point here, but there are so many traditional ways and processes run by law firms which are going to need to change. The pandemic has pushed us very, very quickly into a lot of these areas. And I think what we owe it to ourselves and what law firms owe it to themselves is to actually don't stop that momentum. When we go back to work on whatever date it might be, don't all suddenly say, well, that was nice, let's all revert to normal. Let's all come back to the office 5 days a week. Let's do our printing. Let's post a copy of a contract we've already sent by email. The biggest challenge we've got, I think, and we all work in technology, so we can actually force this change, is to get people to understand that we've got to really benefit from the last 3 months. It's had a major impact on all of us from all sorts of points of view. We'd be absolutely crazy if we didn't learn from it. And that's the message you've got to continue to push out there. And I think we're pushing on open doors, but we've got to make sure those doors don't close very quickly.
That's a very powerful message there, Chris. Thank you for that. That's all we've got time for today, unfortunately. I wish that we had maybe made this a little bit longer, because I think our viewers are still very much glued to their screens. But you've given us really good insight into A, what you've been doing, B, where that investment should be for law firms going forward. And I think, as I said, that last little message that you had for me was very powerful, in that, let's use this time that we've had during this lockdown and during this pandemic and kind of help law firms to adapt to the change and to transform processes, automation, all of it. It's going to be a big task, but I think it's an opportunity for us all to kind of get that in place. So yeah, thanks again for joining, Chris. It's been really great catching up with you and having you on the podcast.
Okay, my pleasure, and I hope people have enjoyed it and found it valuable, and I wish everybody the best of luck in their ongoing journeys.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for that. Thanks for joining, okay. Alex. And
no problem.
All our viewers. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.